Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Pond Hunter broadcast from the Under the Sea radio show on Blog Talk Radio. The Pond Hunter, in the pursuit of all things aquatic. Take a look into the world of koi ponds, water gardens, and the lifestyles of the aquatically obsessed. Meet the pros, hobbyists, and cover some no-nonsense pond advice straight from the field. The Pond Hunter, in the pursuit of all things aquatic. Here's your host, koi pond and water garden expert, Mike Gannon.
Quite an introduction. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pond Hunter radio broadcast, episode 50. I'm your host, Mike Gannon. Very happy to be here with all of you. In this 50th episode, we're going to be talking about how we can manage our ponds during periods of very high temperatures and heat waves. A lot of pond keepers live in areas that kind of always have high temperatures. Arizona and Texas come to mind, of course. And many of us pond keepers also live in areas that are prone to get heat waves. At some point, most pond keepers will deal with very sudden jumps in temperature to extreme highs for prolonged periods. In other words, a heat wave. And ponds, during those times, there's certain things that should be done to kind of manage those situations. And ponds are no exception. And it's kind of like this is where we have our goldfish, our koi, our aquatic plants. There's some things that should be done a little differently during those times. And my guest tonight is going to help us wade through these types of issues. So Matt Boring of Texas Ponds and Water Features is going to be with us. Matt is the owner of Texas Ponds and Water Features. He's a well-respected pond professional in the industry. He's a contributing writer to some of the industry magazine, Pond Trade magazine. I think being in Texas, Matt definitely deals with high temperatures on a pretty consistent basis. I'm sure that Texas has its share of heat waves as well. I'm excited to have Matt come on and join us and share his expertise with us. So, hey, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Sorry, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty. I guess you were trying to call in and we couldn't connect, but here we are. So thanks so much for coming on to the Pond Hunter radio broadcast. How you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm very happy to have you here. Has it been hot in Texas this summer?
It has been a little bit, not as much as it has in the past, but we had a couple of days last week, several in a row that were like 103, 105 degrees.
Okay.
Pretty miserable.
Yeah, that could be hot. It could be miserable. So it sounds like we're going to be discussing the right topic tonight and giving the listeners some high temperature pond keeping tips. So, getting into our topic, I think there's a lot of good general information out there that all pond keepers can utilize and apply almost regardless of where they keep their pond. But some pond keepers absolutely have to deal with high temperatures, where reaching over 100 degrees Fahrenheit is a pretty commonplace occurrence, like in your area. So I think pond keepers need to think differently about how they build their ponds, equipment choices, how they manage plants and fish, etc. So let's kind of start at the beginning and talk about planning a pond. If you live in a hot area, what are some of the things that should be considered when people are planning a pond when they live in high temperature areas?
Well, shade is a good one. If there's already some existing shade, that's something to consider if you can get that shade onto the pond in the hot afternoon hours.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest thing that you can do is make sure it's partially shaded. As far as where you're building it, we build most of our ponds are 2 feet deep ponds, regular garden ponds, water gardens. We have gone as deep as 5 feet. Some clients want deeper. Some fish lovers insist that their ponds be deeper than 2 feet. So we can go deeper if people want that.
Okay.
In my pond, it has a sunny part and a shady part. So there's some shade that comes over part of the pond during the hottest part of the afternoon. So I would assume, based on that, people are always telling me, oh yeah, you got to have deep pond for koi. So I would assume, well, it's 105 degrees, those koi are going to be hanging out in the shade. But really, they don't. They still, go through the entire pond. They don't huddle in the shade when it's hot.
So they do got to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
I'm interested in, you're talking about, the depth. So in-ground ponds would definitely be insulated better against high temperatures, for example, versus like an above-ground pond. Do you think that the above-ground ponds are more prone? Okay, so they're more prone to temperature issues and fluctuations than an in-ground pond would be.
Most of the ponds we do are 2 feet deep ponds, just because we want them to be considered landscape improvements, and we don't want to put our customers under any weird swimming pool regulations. Some people may say that a pond over 2 feet deep needs to be treated like a swimming pool and be fenced and things like that. So, but in a backyard, a lot of these people, want their pond a little deeper than 2 feet. So we'll definitely go deeper. The deepest we have, We've done 2 ponds that are 5 feet deep.
Nice. So a deeper pond is going to be better insulated. It's going to stay cooler. What about the size of a pond? Is that going to affect how it responds to temperature changes? Is a bigger pond better? Is a smaller pond more of a risk? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think bigger ponds are definitely better because they're not as affected by not so quickly. A small pond can be changed really quickly with temperature extremes or with even rainfall. 4 inches of rain in a 20 by 20 pond is not going to change out nearly as much water as 4 inches of rain in an 8 by 8 pond or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So bigger and deeper should definitely be a consideration. I come across, I'm sure you see it too, out in the field, a lot of ponds that just have exposed EPDM liners, or they are the prefabricated like pond shells. Maybe you get at Home Depot or some of the garden centers. If it's just an exposed liner or one of those prefab shells, are those more prone to heat up?
Oh, I would say definitely just a black color is going to absorb the heat. And when you don't protect that EPDM from UV rays, you're encouraging it to break down prematurely. All of our ponds have liner, and then we have small boulders and gravel, covering all the EPDM. We don't use those preformed shells. I've seen them used around, and as well as I do. You go to people's houses and they have these things already installed. A lot of times, with our sunlight, I guess it causes those things to break down prematurely, and they get brittle, and those plastic things will crack, and then they're just done for.
Yeah, the sun can really do a lot of damage to certain liners, certain types of liners. And, we build the same way you do. We use rock and gravel to kind of cover our ponds and everything. So a rock and gravel pond essentially is better insulated against temperature fluctuations, correct?
I would say so. I just think we build these ponds, and so before the water's in there, before the rocks and gravel are in there, we have a empty shell that's lined with black EPDM liner, and it's 100 degrees outside. So it's like an oven, basically. But once the rock and gravel go in, you can walk around in that pond, and it's not nearly as hot. So I don't know, once the water's added, what the difference might be, but I would assume that a black liner pond is going to have warmer water than one that has rock and gravel. That's just my opinion, I guess.
I think you're Right. I would agree with you on that. So, we're kind of talking about construction and how you're building stuff. What about fish caves and fish tunnels? Is that a good way to help keep your fish from maybe getting too much sun or too high temperature?
Absolutely. Well, I at least it gives them an option. If they are too hot, they can go in there and there's shade, so it's going to be cooler. We try to install fish tunnels or fish caves. Fish caves, a little more simple. Fish tunnels I like them a little better because they have two entrances. They're a little more fun to build and disguise, because we always try to disguise everything so that you don't see that cave, you don't see that tunnel. It just looks like part of the pond construction, the rocks and the gravel. And then, hey, there's a little space in there, and hey, those fish just disappeared. Hey, look, it's coming out on the other side. Wow.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that. And I think the
little intrigue.
Enjoy. Yeah, exactly. They can go in there and talk about their owners and plan their escape. Actually, I'm sure they love their So, I was kind of thinking about some different considerations, and I think you touched on it real quick, but I guess where you locate your pond would be something to consider. So, like, I'm thinking, and I might be wrong, it may not even matter, but in hotter areas, maybe, if you can choose where your pond's going to be, like your north, southeast, west side of your yard, maybe the southern exposure would not be the best location if you do live in high heat areas like Texas, Arizona, stuff like that. Do you think that's right, or maybe that's not a real important consideration?
I got to tell you, I've probably never, ever gone into a yard and said, oh, I got to put your pond here because that's where the shade is. I go to the yard and I go where the pond needs to be because of how it's going to be viewed from the house. My own pond in the backyard, I built this pond for one of my customers, and then she moved out and bought a different house, and she let me move into this house. So I'm living with one of these ponds that I built for someone else. This yard has no shade. It has no shade trees at all. So it's full sun, and it goes from left to right across the yard. So it's in sun all day long. But when it does go into the afternoon, I have part of my patio cover that provides shade to a little end of my pond. And I don't have any problems with, anything that is heat related. I haven't had any problems with, fish dying or anything drastic. So I don't. Okay. I mean, I guess it could be a consideration, but I've never made it the consideration. My main consideration of where it's going to look best from the viewing area and, be most interactive to the customer.
Okay. And then I guess you could, if it does happen to be a hot area of the yard, regardless of its, orientation, whether it's southern exposure or not, you could use things like strategic landscape plantings and aquatic plantings to shade and kind of cool off that area. So, I guess where it's located. Yep. Now, what about when people are getting like filter systems together? Would you recommend using an integrated filter system like a skimmer, submerged pump, biofalls in high temperature areas, or is it perfectly okay using external components? Is there a difference, or is there no difference?
I really can't answer that too honestly, because all these years I've used biofalls and skimmers, and I would assume that having things buried, like the biofalls is buried in the waterfall berm, the skimmer is in the ground, so the pump's sitting, a couple of feet of water on top of it. I would assume that would keep things cooler than external. One really neat thing that helps that I have on my pond, to Ed Ballou about this a little bit, a bog filter. The bog filter goes 4 feet down into the ground. And so I came home the other day, and it was over 100 degrees, and I thought, I'm going to stick my hand in the pond and feel how warm that. I bet it's like bath water. And it was actually rather cool. And I was thinking, why is my water so cool? And I was like, oh, that bog filter is probably pulling heat out and adding coolness as that water flows so, slowly through the bog. And it's actually radiating heat away from the pond. And so I texted Ed Ballou and I said, Ed, is this possible? Am I just being weird? He goes, no, it's absolutely true. It's the same thing as geothermal heating or geothermal cooling of a home. It's exactly the same. A bog filter can help keep a pond in this area even cooler than it would be. So that's a really good consideration.
Okay. And that doesn't sound weird. I mean, you should be trying to keep Austin weird. I mean, you know that. But you don't have to, it doesn't have to be that way with your filter system. I've noticed, even in my area, there's a few ponds that I deal with, I help to manage, we provide services for that do have external filter components like pressure filters, like the Ultima, or other types of small pressure filters. And I've never really looked at insulating them against the heat, but I kind of have noticed, those are just filter components that are left exposed to the elements. And when you have what's supposed to be a biological filter sitting in the blaring sun on a 107-degree day, I've always noticed that the ponds get a little murky. And I kind of attribute that to the filters getting so hot that the beneficial bacteria, I think, starts to die off. I think it just gets too hot for the bacteria. So I've always wondered, if you being in those areas, I guess you're not really dealing with those systems too much, but I've always wondered about that in much hotter areas. Because I'm in New Jersey. I mean, we get hot, but there's some areas where it's 100 degrees for a month long is kind of the norm. We'll get 100-degree.
Wow, really?
And I just see, well, I assume, I mean, I guess, areas of Arizona or something like that, maybe get 100 degrees may not really ruffle anybody's feathers.
A few years ago, we had 90 days in a row of 100-degree temperatures.
90 days.
Yeah, we had 5 months completely out of the year that were over 100. Ended up being 5 whole months, including the 90-day stretch without. Yeah, that was a hard year to deal with. But
I'm gonna tell the people.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I would agree with you though. Putting stuff, especially components are made out of black plastic, and sticking them in the sun. Yeah, I would agree that it can't help but to heat things up. Past where they would be if different components were used.
Even touching the outside of it gets really hot. External pumps can get really hot. And you got to think all the water passes through there, so it's almost like it's heating up your pond more than the ambient temperature would be. So
it's producing its own heat and the ambient temperature as well.
Yeah.
The pump is producing heat and being heated up by the sun.
Yeah, so I think people who have those type of systems, and there's quite a few of them, they should be. I would keep a close eye when you know that warm weather's coming, or hot weather's coming, and you'd mentioned that you get these extended periods. If somebody knows that heat wave is forecasted, you think they should try to do some preventive maintenance, maybe clean their filters and everything before high temperatures hit, or just kind of leave things alone so they're stable?
I've never done anything preemptively against heat. These ponds, these ecosystem ponds, they pretty much can handle it. I mean, they handle it. It's just condensed into a backyard form, So, yeah, it's going to get hot. It's going to get cold. Up north, I know these ponds freeze over, and you got to keep a hole in the ice. We don't have that, but we do have the heat. So, what I've really come to admire about ecosystem ponds over the years is their flexibility, ability to kind of be. I mean, I see them in Canada, I see them in Texas, I see them in Mexico. They work. It's just mimicking nature basically. So it's not a far stretch. It's not like designing something that's completely foreign or artificial and then hoping everything's okay. This is pretty much just putting natural processes in place and letting them do their thing, because who does it better than nature?
Yeah, they are incredibly stable. That's what I love about them as well. Being an installer, I'm concerned that I want our clients to have a positive experience and not have to worry about ponds fluctuations of any type, temperature or otherwise. And the ecosystem ponds really are incredibly stable in every way, including water quality, water clarity, the whole thing. So, okay, so we covered some stuff as far as the planning process, where to put things, how make it bigger, make it deeper, consider equipment considerations. Let's get into like when somebody has their pond, and we started going down this path before, but let's talk about aquatic plants. Are there special considerations for plant care during hot weather? Anything special that needs to be done?
Not really. We just prune off the dead lily pads. I mean, do that. It's, how some people say the koi will eat your lilies, and you can't have koi in the same pond with lilies. Well, like I have over 100 ponds in the ground with koi and lilies, so I don't know where that comes from, but my koi leave the lilies completely alone until the pads start going yellow and start going down, and then they eat them. It's the weirdest thing. They leave them alone as long as they're green and growing, and then once they start turning mushy a little bit, then they eat them. So that's a weird thing, but it seems to be just part of the system of the ecosystem thing. They don't mess with it when it's green. They eat it though when it's starting to decay or rot, or break down a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds delicious, I got to tell you. So I actually think that it seems to me like the plants really seem to actually enjoy higher temperatures. I mean, of course, they're not wilting or anything because they're aquatic plants, but a lot of them seem to really almost have a quick pop in how quickly they grow when you get these temperature spikes. I feel like it gets very jungly after we get our first high temperature, a couple weeks.
I wonder if that's because many of these plants are almost kind of tropical, and then they really love that heat, especially, a lot of these tropical lilies. They love the heat.
Yeah.
They don't mind it at all.
Yeah. No, I wonder, I don't know the answer. Maybe you do, maybe it doesn't even matter, but do you think it might be a bad idea to, if like a heat wave is coming or something, or you're heading into higher temperatures, is it a bad idea to fertilize plants at that time? Is it better to maybe wait thoughts on that?
I would not fertilize plants right before it gets hot, because then you got extra nutrients in the water, and then that heat and the nutrients together, might make your water murky. We actually never fertilize any of our plants. So that doesn't, that's not something that I would have any experience with. When I first started building these ponds, these ecosystem ponds, they used to tell us, if you want to fertilize your plants, feed your fish. Normally you don't have to feed the fish. They just graze on the biofilm and the organic debris that's in the pond and the bottoms or whatever. So we don't even normally feed the fish, but they say if you want to fertilize the plants, feed the fish, because then the nutrients that come out of the fish are going to be in a form that the plants can take up a little easier. So,
okay, yeah,
that's something. I just never really. We've always had. I've had these experiences before where I'll have a pond that's totally balanced, the water's clear and no algae and everything's perfect. And I'm like, oh, I sure wish that lily would bloom a little more. Let me throw some fertilizer tab down in the root system. 3 days later, my pond's full of string algae. So I'm like, no, I think I'll just let nature do its thing. Most of the time, it does it just perfect.
When nature's doing it, it's a beautiful thing. What about fish care? Why are higher temperatures even a concern for fish keepers?
I really don't know. I think people have their own sets of experience based on their own locales, and they assume that the fish can't handle things that they assume that they can't handle. And with my experience, I would think probably thinking, oh, the fish are fine in all this hot weather. I wonder how they do up north where it freezes over. How can they possibly survive?
Yeah.
Yep, they do. They're pretty hardy fish. Koi, goldfish,
Right.
the pumpkins,
So even during periods of extreme weather, even in your area, you're not really coming across, fish stressing out because of heat or high water temperatures or anything like that. Everything basically does remain fairly stable.
Yeah, I can only say for the ponds that we build, and those are the ones I have the most experience with. I don't know that some of these other people that build, some of these ponds that are above ground, for instance, like you were mentioning, if they have specific problems or situations that they have to address because of the way those ponds are built. We've always built the in-ground ponds so that, right off the bat, you get some geothermal cooling. And then, like we were talking about, putting the bog filter 4 feet down into the ground. I guess you could go even deeper if you wanted to. Filters underground that far are relatively stable. And since the bog flows the water through it so slowly, it gives it plenty of time to radiate off some of that heat and cool that water off before it pours back into the pond.
Yeah.
I like to put a bog on any pond that's 15 by 15 or larger if there's possibly a way to do it. I would much rather use that than the biofalls because I like how they go together and make the waterfall easier for me to build. But sometimes I'll put a biofall but not put any filtration media in it because I have a bog filter over there, and the bog filter is going to do the filtration way, way better than the biofalls would anyway. So the biofalls may just be a waterfall box for me, but that's how I like to build waterfalls. I grew up building them that way, so I'm not going to change.
Yeah, bog filtration is just powerhouse filtration. And, the times that I've come across where I've seen heat stress with fish, it has been under pretty specific circumstances. Usually they're either small ponds or shallow ponds or stuff like that where the water temperature just gets too high. So, when temperatures are real high, I usually recommend people maybe even cut back on their feeding a little bit when we're going through like a heat wave, especially in Jersey, because it's just a temporary spike. So everything gets a little out of whack in that respect. So, I usually do tell them to feed a little bit less. I usually ask people to refrain from medicating. I'm not big on medicating in general, but I don't think medicating fish during a high temperatures, heat waves or anything like that is a good idea. What are your thoughts on that?
I would probably agree with that. We've never really medicated fish. I've had one customer that ended up putting some pond salt in his water. He had some fish that we had rescued from another pond that was totally inadequately filtered, and they were huge, nice. Well, I'll say huge. They were 15 to 20-inch koi. 26 of them in a 10 by 15 pond that was 2 feet deep, and it was just black liner, and the water was black. And the guy had this tiny little canister filter, and every day he'd do a partial water change, and he had all these chemicals lined up that he had to treat the water with, and he was moving. So he offered us those koi, and we took those and we put them in one of our customers' ponds, and after a while, they started dying off one by one. So he took one of them and got him checked out. They said they have parasites. And, this is probably something they had when we brought them from the other pond. And so he treated his pond with salt.
Yep.
But as far as medicated pond food, koi food and stuff like that, we've never actually done that. I've never really had koi show sores or, any signs of sickness, every once in a while we get one that dies, a fish will die. But
Right.
it's so rare that if we had 3 or 4 die in a row, then something's wrong. But, one dies and another one dies a year or two later. It's not something I'm going to say, wow, there's something wrong with this pond.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of have the same experience. It's very, very rare, extremely rare that we get sick ponds. And, we deal with a lot of ponds. We deal with literally thousands and thousands of fish. And it's pretty rare, So we don't do a lot of medication. That's for sure. So I certainly wouldn't recommend it in periods of really high temperatures, because I think that's you're kind of borderline on stressful situations anyway. What is some
the fish are already stressing from the heat.
Yeah, and if that's the case, let's say you need to bring the water temperatures down a little bit. What are some things that people could do maybe to cool their ponds off if they're having some temperature issues?
Oh, float giant blocks of ice in there.
Okay. The iceberg approach.
No, I'm just kidding. I really don't know that as far as cooling stuff up. I would think that by doing, say partial water changes, maybe a 10% water change 3 days in a row or something, add a little dechlorinator and stuff, water conditioner. If you're only changing out 10%, you really don't need the dechlorinator, but, why not if you're going to do it 3 days in a row? But that will introduce some cooler water from the hose, pump out some of the warmer water from the pond and pump it in your garden. That stuff's some good water, good nutritious, natural fertilizer. So always if you're pumping pond water out, pump it on your plants or on your grass or somewhere. But then just add a little water from the hose. Maybe have to do it several days in a row. If you have these extended heat waves, that might be a way to do it.
Yeah,
cheaper than the ice
be a
block.
good way to do it. Yeah, and that that's not so crazy, Matt, because I've done that. We've had a couple situations actually during cleanouts where fish are being kept in temporary containers, and just the day's temperatures get away from us, and we've literally floated bags of ice and freezer packs and stuff like that to bring down temperatures. So I wouldn't see any problem if somebody popping some ice or freezer packs in their skimmer or in their biofalls, even in their stream, to kind of slowly help to bring down temperatures. I think running a hose is a good suggestion, and adding shade.
Yeah, those freezer packs, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, you get some of those in there.
Those gel packs or something?
Yeah. But I would say just when it comes to running a hose, don't add too much water too quick, because you can literally cool your pond down too quick. So that's let it run low and slow for a bit. And adding shade. You can put an umbrella by your pond. You could add a shade sail over your pond. There's a few different things.
Those shade sails are awesome. Yeah, those shade sails are amazing. Yep.
They're really cool, and they're fun. I would like to put one up full time. Yeah.
And you can put them at the right angle, at the right place, so that you can get the shade exactly where you need it, where you want it at the right time of the year, because you know how the sun tracks across the sky a little different in the winter or in the summer. So you need that shade maybe in the summer. You don't need it so much in the winter. So those shade sails are so neat.
Who are dealing with high temperature situations, you can do those things to bring down temperature, but I think having an aerator on hand too, if you don't consistently oxygenate your water, having a portable air pump or a small air pump can come in very handy when temperatures start getting high. So aerating a pond is a real good way to do it as well.
Especially if you keep that air pump in the shade. You don't want to have it right out in that 110 degree sun pumping that hot air pond. But definitely, I agree that aeration is. We always aerate our deeper ponds, not necessarily our 2 feet deep ponds. But I really like that Aquascape Pro aerator.
Yeah, that's a beast.
It really puts out the air.
It does, no doubt. Yeah, those are awesome. So aeration is a really
I've used the smaller ones. I've used the smaller aerators before, but that pro aerator really puts out the bubbles.
Yeah, they really do. They crank. They're awesome. And some tips for the humans too. If it gets really hot out, go hang out by your pond, because temperatures sometimes
Go hang out in your pond.
Lower. Go hang out in your pond. Get on that iceberg and float around your pond. So temperature control is great for everybody. And it's another great reason to have a pond. It's kind of like natural air conditioning in your backyard.
It's true. It's a waterfall is going to create some evaporative cooling. It just can't help but create evaporative cooling. So if it's close up to the viewing area, I would definitely think that's a cooler place to be than in the other yard where there's no pond. Of course, I have one in my front yard too, so I got a big pondless waterfall in the front yard too. So no matter which door I go out, I'm hearing waterfall.
You got options. That's cool. So these are some great tips. I hope everybody has learned something from this. And Matt, thank you so much for coming on to the Pond Hunter Radio broadcast. The time just has flown by. I really appreciate you being here, and for sharing my 50th episode with me, a really hot episode. So that was Matt Boring from Texas Ponds and Water Features, everybody, and Matt services the Austin and Central Texas area. Thanks again, Matt, for sharing your knowledge with us. So as a quick recap, let's do a rundown of what we covered. If you live in an area that gets really hot, of course, plan for that. Go in-ground with your pond for the insulating benefits of Mother Earth. In-ground ponds are much cooler than above-ground ponds. Dig a little deeper than usual to ensure that those cooler zones of water are keeping the pond nice and cool during the hottest of weather. And remember that rock and gravel inside of ponds not only look amazing and help in filtration, but they are excellent insulators, and they'll keep your pond cooler and less prone to temperature fluctuations in summer and in winter. Put in a fish cave or a fish tunnel, allow those fish to get out of the sun, and keep your aerator handy. And make sure you position the diffusers correctly. Don't go too deep because you don't want to mix up the bottom water, which is probably cooler than the top water. And if you ever really have an emergency, you could drop bags of ice or freezer packs into your skimmer, your biofalls, your stream to help bring down temperatures, or just run your hose running into your pond. If you're on city water, you want to treat it accordingly so you're not getting chlorine issues or anything like that. And the best thing, of course, is always just preparation. Watch your weather. Make sure that you know what's happening, what's around the corner as far as the conditions that your pond may be subjected to. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm your host, Mike Gannon. My company is Full Service Aquatics, and we're based out of New Jersey. We specialize in koi ponds, water gardens, water feature design, installation, and services. My website is fullserviceaquatics.com. My phone number is 908-277-6000. And if you have a project or a pond issue you'd like to discuss, give me a call. And you can also find more of the Pond Hunter Radio broadcast archived on iTunes, and you can find it on YouTube as well. I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Pond Hunter Radio broadcast. I really do hope that this content is helpful to all of you aquatically obsessed. Thanks for doing episode 50 with me. That's pretty cool. Episode 50. I appreciate all of you listening. It's hard to believe I'm 50 episodes deep into this podcast. In this, I'm trying to bring you the best advice in pond keeping, fish keeping, and water gardening. In my opinion, the water is really muddy when it comes to good pond keeping information that you get out there on the internet, the interwebs, and all that good stuff. Spend an hour on social media, and you know what I mean. The information and advice given here in this broadcast is largely based on experience in the field, working directly with ponds or water features of every type for 20 plus years now. And as a pond professional, I'm the guy that solves people's pond keeping problems. I'm the guy called in when things are going wrong. My job is to make them right. I rarely get a call to come out and see how great a pond is doing. I would love to get those calls too, Y'all, give me a call. So I base what comes out of my mouth on direct personal experience with what I am reporting to you. And I'm sharing with you all about what I see working well for ponds. And we talk about what doesn't work too. I report to you all with as little bias as I can muster. I try to present the fun stuff and the challenges involved with pond keeping and have nothing to gain or take away from any of the methods, equipment, products, or information that I promote, endorse, or use. I try to give you all good, honest view into my world of being a pond professional. I hope that the information I give you will, in fact, make your pond keeping experiences a better one, a more enjoyable one, or even the life-changing experience that it can be. And if I can't base what we're talking about on direct personal first-person experience, I will bring in an industry expert to help us sort out all the issues that pond keepers have to deal with. I hope the information I present saves pond keepers time, energy, an amazingly enjoyable experience. If it's done wrong, it can be a real drag and expensive. Professional pond installations, they're expensive, bottom line. But to have it done right the first time really is a huge savings in the long run. Huge. Ponds done wrong are more expensive. I'll always recommend working with your local pond professional, preferably a certified professional, when planning a koi pond, water garden, water feature. Get it done right. Because whether you're 2 years old or 102 years old, a beautiful water feature interests and pleases everybody. It's a great family hobby. Keeps everyone home and together. I mean, come on. Everybody should have a pond. Seriously. And that's what I'm trying to bring you with the Pond Hunter radio broadcast. I'm 50 episodes deep into that endeavor. Thanks again to all of you that listen. Thanks to all my awesome guests who have shared the airwaves with me. I love you all. I'm thankful for you all. We'll see you on the next episode. You can catch up with me on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep it pondy, everybody. And I'll be watching for you on the next Pond Hunter radio podcast.
You have been listening to the Pond Hunter radio broadcast on Blog Talk Radio with your host, Mike Gannon, the Pond Hunter. In the pursuit of all things aquatic, broadcasting Wednesday nights on Blog Talk Radio. The Pond Hunter, keeping it pondy for the aquatically obsessed.
That's right, everybody. Keeping it pondy, and we will catch you next time. Take good care. Keep cool. Peace.